So we are here for the this is a special episode. We have Arsenault Rivera. She is the writer of the new Wilds of Eldraine, and this is Magic Moronz. So welcome to the show, Kay.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's always awesome to hang out. So excited to talk about Magic Story a bit.
Yes. Now, okay, one thing that we were talking about prior to is the narrative of this, and I'm just going to jump in with like sort of, it's different from the other ones in a sense that there are no side stories this time around.
Right.
How do you think that shaped the birth of the story for you as a writer?
So when we have no side stories to work with, I mean, whenever you're working on IP fiction, there's a bit of a trust fall involved, right? Where you're looking at the overarching, content of what should happen in a story, and you have to make some decisions about what gets cut. And sometimes when you make those decisions, you're like, well, the cards can fill that in, or, well, there'll be a side story to fit that in. Now, with Wilds of Eldraine, we really wanted to fit as much as possible into these stories, which is why they tend to run a little bit longer than you would usually see from a 5-story set. So we tried to jam pack as much as we could in there.
That's okay. So I feel like that, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I think honestly there's did we lose you?
I'm so sorry.
That sucks. For a second I thought, I was like, that was a very abrupt ending to the sentence.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
But yes, we try to pick jam as much as we can into those, and we try to be conscious of like what's here has to express the entire story of the set as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. I got to tell you, like it was crackling. Like it was so good. Thank you
so much.
Like so good. I mean, Alison, right? Is it not like
from the moment I finished watching Alper's interview till this very moment, I was like, okay, we need to have her in because I need to express how much of a beacon of a light that was in my week.
Oh, it was, thank you so much.
Everything, and especially because now everybody that plays Magic and plays D&D and tabletop RPGs and it's with Magic like that, love it, really well.
And I mean, yeah, it's like Alison. So, like, did you like the new characters? That's the thing I noticed too. Is like so many new characters, but I instantly love them already.
Yeah.
Did you have any idea that, okay, this for you, did you have any idea that, I mean, when you came in writing this, like what was established? Are you allowed to say what was established as far as like the points you had to hit, or were there things in place? Like I'm assuming obviously Oko being Kellen's father was like something that was predetermined.
Yeah, so there's always some stuff that's laid out. The broad points of the story are usually established, and it's the finer details where we have a bit more room to play. So stuff like Oko being Kellen's father is, that's already decided. But what his mother's like and what his stepfather is like, that's something that I can play with. We have this idea that Rowan should face off against a renegade knight, but we don't know anything about who that renegade knight is. And so Imogen becomes born out of that contrast there of who is this, who can I showcase here that's a good parallel to Rowan and to Will and also to Kellen along their journeys. So it's about that sort of thing. And I mean, there is some malleability even within the large plot points. Sometimes we can have discussions if we feel like something's not working and should be attacked from a different angle. So it's a very collaborative process. I'm fortunate in that the story team has always been very open to that sort of thing. And we have a pretty good relationship for discussing what needs to happen in a story.
What about, do you any questions that you have off the bat, Alison? Anything that was burning for you, your Brazilian brain, as it were?
I mean, I was just like reading that and how we would all point out. I mean, now thinking about it, you mentioned like not having any side stories, but if we see like we have those two stories intertwined kind of in a way, right? Mm-hmm. Because it starts off with this whole like, all right, everybody's a king now. The realm is at war, trauma, and all of that thing that carried all over, like from the whole other sad Will Roman story, like culminating the point, literally starting up in a brawl, in a fist fight, and the crack and thunder and all that shit. And then we cut to basically a place where the war had not touched like at all, barely knew anything. And there's a small story about someone being bullied and have like magical powers all of a sudden, right? And it's a good parallel, right? Because at the same time we have the high end, high level worries of the now regions, and we have now the local problems, right? I don't think they mention a lot of that, and it's strange, right? It's strange to see the above like this, and it's weird to see how much we like them. Actually, I was not expecting. We usually have those characters just in Saturday. It's great.
I think that honestly, this one was different because of the fact that Eldraine's not a really very established plane, right? There's not like a lot of information that we have because, I mean, was there? This is gonna sound stupid.
No, it's all right. I'm still here.
She's a planeswalker, actually. She's just blinking between realities.
I'm still here.
Yeah, exactly.
Was there even a story? Okay, I hope this isn't. I'm not embarrassing. Was there even a story for Eldraine? Like, really, when it came out, I don't remember there being like a push story.
There's a novel, and it's called The Wildered Quest, and it's by Kate Elliott, who is an award-winning author.
Oh, that's
and a total sweetheart. So I do have to defend her here.
No, I'm not defending that. I'm just saying, like, that was the time where Magic was sort of doing the paywall thing, and I feel bad that I have not read the story, but now that you mentioned, I'm stupid, but like there was no online Magic story at that time.
It was just with the Wildered Quest. Yeah,
that's what I meant. I heard it was good. I heard it was good, but I think that it just got sandwiched in at a time where, and this is just my personal opinion, but like, I do not blame any of the creative forces when things would go wrong for like the authors. I don't blame them for any sort of decisions that were maybe obviously corporate or whatever. That's just my opinion. But I think it just got put out at a time where it just got and didn't have enough time to like and get the press that it was needed. So please understand, I'm not trying.
No. It's totally fine. It was a weird time in Magic story because we also had Theros Beyond Death coming out around then that also didn't really have a story.
Yeah, I mean,
So it was just a weird time. And I think that for a lot of people, this, as you say, is the first engagement that they've had with Eldraine, which is what makes somebody like Kellen and what makes somebody like Ruby so important too, is that they really need to do a lot of work in these stories to hook new people in. Because this is the first story set after March of the Machine. If somebody is trying to get into reading Magic story, they couldn't have started with March of the Machine because there's just so much going on there. But you can start with Wilds of Eldraine because all you need to know is that Rowan and Will are the regents now. They lost their parents. There was a big war. And Kellen is now trying to run this quest. And all of that is explained to you in the first episode. So you can really just go on with that. And that was definitely something that I was keeping in mind to the point about Kellen being super likable is I had to make him as likable as possible because we're going to be with him for quite some time. He's got other adventures he's going to go on now.
He is very likable. I think that Ruby's likable too. I mean, they were lots of fun. You really did do that great balance of the dark and heavy because with Rowan, I mean, is that difficult to write when like she's just going through it and
it's not difficult for me. When it comes to comic books, my favorite arc has always been the Dark Phoenix arc, and it was one of the first ones that really got me into comic books. And you can definitely see the influence of that in some of my writing, but especially when I was working on the Rowan arc, I was like, oh boy, I get to do Dark Phoenix.
So that's fun for you. That's a fun thing. You kind of are like, oh great, somebody's going down a dark path.
I've always found sinister characters very interesting. Like in Star Wars, I think Inquisitors are really cool characters. I also think that there's a lot that you can delve into with the Sith and with what the dark side of the Force can be other than just violence, etc. So for me, I've always had an attraction to those kinds of characters and concepts. So it's very easy for me to write that. It was actually harder for me to write Kellen.
I'm wondering that. That's funny. That's interesting. But you know what? I understand that. It makes sense. Like I'm not like my default setting as a person is not like lighthearted and like fun. So I think I can artistically tap into the dark stuff easier than the light stuff. But speaking of dark stuff, though, the villain aspect of it, you had so much that you had to tackle with March of the Machines, and so now you have a whole new like selection of the villains in this piece, but one of them being one that was established already, being Ashiok, and then you have Ariette. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, it's Ariette.
Ariette, yeah. Which is it daunting to sort of take I mean, do you get like a sense of, I guess, is there a level of difficulty with having these new villains coming out of nowhere? Because I feel like, honestly, it just makes me forget about the March of the Machines because they're that effective as villains. So,
well, thank you.
How do you go from like something that's so giant and something that's so intimate? And I mean, how do you do that as a writer? How do you tackle that?
Well, it's a matter of scope, right? And when we think about Wilds of Eldraine, in order to make a story that, for, a story that stays on one plane, a lot of things happen. We are basically telling two stories, but we only have the space of one story to tell them in. And in order to do that, you need to have as many personal ties as possible. So having all three of the witches, Agatha dies pretty quickly, but we get to establish who she is with her little sing-songy bit. Then Hilda has her whole moment to shine as well. With the bottle episode with Ruby, we get to learn a bit more about her, and her kindness and her opening up is there in contrast to Rowan kind of becoming more isolationist. And then with Ariette is the one who's pulling all those strings, but Ariette is also Wayland Rowan's aunt, and so we have to think of her in that context too. She's offering Rowan what Rowan wants right now, maybe not what Rowan needs, but definitely what she wants. And she's allowing Rowan to get to that next level of villainous development, shall we say. So keeping them tied in there as much as possible was very important. And I think that with Hilda and with Ariette, especially being able to play them off of the twins and the twins' natures was also helpful in terms of setting up those narrative echoes that feel powerful when we only have a small amount of space. Yeah. Ashiok is fun because Ashiok is a fun little spice that you could just throw in there in most cases.
It's a little bit of mischief in that.
Yeah.
They're so evil.
They're so evil. But
so evil.
One of the things I love about Ashiok, though, is that because Ashiok meddled around in Elish Norn's head, the multiverse is still there.
That's the thing. Like, that was okay. That was one of the best. That was such a great sight. Like, that was, when that story came out, like, I shat my pants with joy. That was just good shit. Like, the freaking Elspeth, was like John Carpenter, like, Beth from The Thing coming out,
Yeah.
All the way until that point, Phyrexians were this untouched, like unable to be moved wall, and then all of a sudden we see Ashiok just like walking around. I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna try to put a needle over there." Oh shit! Look at that! They can fear everybody.
So, did you have an involvement with that? I mean, what was your involvement with that? Because I mean, like, I know that you. You came on for Crimson Vow, right? That was your the Midnight Hunt was your first story. Yes. Which, and by the way, I'm still thinking about Crimson Vow being like a Fox News like allegory, like Edgar Markov watching too much Fox News, like that.
That's exactly what happens.
Seriously, I'm like, I get it. Like, I really, really love that. And okay, so are there any sort of things like about this current story that you could like put a little like spin on? Like, did you have like any sort of like exterior sort of inspirations that are along that lines of like the Edgar Markov Fox News allegories kind of thing? Was there any of that happening in this story? Because
so I would say that there's some of my personal experiences in it, because Kellen, like me, is mixed race. So there's a lot of my feelings and outlook about that sort of thing are in there, kind of in a similar way with how Arlen is handled in Midnight Hunt, which is an interesting thing because Kellen is literally mixed race, but Arlen is a mixed race allegory. So you kind of get the two different approaches there. But in terms of what I was able to add here, there was a lot in terms of the prose itself. And the references and the styling of it. So Wilds of Eldraine is written in a very particular style. I use more English root words, English and, like Saxon, that sort of stuff, than Greek or Latin. And that creates, no, if you go through and you look at most of the words, you'll see there's a preponderance of English root words. And the reason that is done is to evoke that fairy tale feeling and to make it feel like a very old story that you would hear in English. That's something that I actually stole from Tolkien, but it's a very good trick to pull.
I mean, if you're gonna stole something, stole for the greats, right?
Right, exactly.
I mean, that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Sorry, my mind was blown by that. I'm sorry. Continue.
The other thing that you'll notice is there's a couple references throughout. The one that I is dearest to my heart is the way that chapter 5 starts, which is Child Kellen to the ruined castle comes, and that is a reference to the Dark Tower and also Childe Roland. So Childe Roland is a very old poem. Well, it's not that old. It's by Robert Browning. But Childe Roland as a concept, a paladin who is journeying to this Dark Tower where he must overcome forces, yada, 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 is a very old concept, medieval literature one. And the opening line, Childe Roland to the Dark Tower comes, gets referenced a lot, most notably in the Stephen King series by the same name, The Dark Tower. So I really wanted to get that and I was willing to argue for it. And I was vindicated when some people recognized it.
So that's an interesting. So when you make an argument like that, do you make it to like the team? Is it like a writer's room in like television, like where you have a whole bunch of people sitting there around a table? Or is it like a presentation that you make to a professor? Like, how do you do that?
It's nothing so serious as that. It's usually just arguing in the margins of a Word document. But sometimes for larger things, we'll check in and we'll just have a quick Zoom call. And in that case, it's usually me and one or two people just talking regular. As I said, I've got a very good relationship with the story team, and they've been incredible people, very supportive. And we're all just interested in telling the best story that we possibly can. So if I go in and I say something like, well, it's really important to me to get this reference in because I think that it thematically reinforces a lot of what we're going for, the answer is usually, well, I think it's kind of awkward, but okay.
That's great. I mean, I guess it's a terrible question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you have a favorite that you've done so far? Like as one that you would say that is your I don't know, your like trophy story of Magic, or do you pick favorites, or is it ones where you're like, you can't pick one, you gotta love them all?
I would say that if I had to pick only one, it would probably be the Elspeth Bottle episode from March of the Machine, because that one
was great.
There was a touch of divinity about it almost, because I wrote it in a single sitting, and like I basically just did not remember writing it after I wrote it.
Wow.
It was something like that. Yeah, I started and then I just didn't stop until I was done with that one. And that's happened a couple times to me in my writing career, and both the things that I produced in those states are very dear to me. So getting to write the culmination of a 20-year story for Elspeth is definitely up there. I like the last episode of March a lot. Crimson Vow as a whole is also very touching to me, but I couldn't pick a single story from that. And from this one, I would probably say that my favorite is the Ruby episode.
She's great. What a fun character. I mean, but it's so interesting that you had a hard time writing such fun, loving characters. Now, do we know, and I guess I shouldn't pry, but he is fictional. Do we know if Kellen is family or not? Because I'm assuming that gonna be.
Well, he's a teenager. He's still figuring things out. So that may well be part of his journey going forward. That's not something that I was concerned with when I was writing, but I think it's something that we have a lot of space to discover in the future, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was, but I think he's still figuring things out.
Because I'm 300 years old, you see. So because of that, I come from a time where fae was actually a word that was used, especially in the Jewish community. Like it was,
it was a little fae.
Yeah, he's a little fae, which would literally it was sort of like, it was like the F word light I guess would
Yes.
be the way to describe it. It wasn't necessarily like a mean spirited insult, but it was like kind of slang for being gay. But I always thought it'd be kind of funny in my head to be like a fae. Who's a fae? That would be just kind of fun.
What I would say to that is that although Oko has produced a child, I don't think that man is straight. There's no earthly way that man is straight. He's got to be bi. He's got to be bi.
He's got to be because first of all, when I make an argument with like if you look like Oko, like it's selfish to not be bi because you should let everybody have a chance, right?
Yeah.
Somebody, I think it's just a good deed. Like James Dean, like bisexual. Like
like a James Dean bisexual. That's exactly it.
Yeah, it's like what was James Dean's mother said? They asked her if he was bisexual, and she goes, or they asked him, and he said, "Well, I don't like to walk through life with one arm tied behind my back." It's like
it's such a good line. Honestly, what an icon.
I was like, that's pretty, that's baller. I mean, be asked like, cause he died, he died in this like early 60s with it. Like,
yeah. And he was very young when he died too.
Yeah. So he's basically, that's the equivalent of being like, yeah, I'm bi.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think definitely Oko has got to be queer. If you're asking me, that's just my personal opinion and not an official statement from Wizards of the Coast. It's just my personal headcanon.
Like it's just in Oko is totally bi. He's bi and he's fae, and he's got abs.
Man, dude is jacked.
Yes.
I know, right? Like, I mean, I don't know if they have roids on Eldraine, but they do.
Oh Christ.
Oko's got a Trembolone problem, so but so the names of the characters too. Is there any rhyme or reason to picking them? I mean, they're always so. There's gotta. I mean, Kellen. I'm interested to know because I knew a Kellen, and he actually was a fae, and he looked like Kellen. He
so
was.
Fun.
I mean, Kellen could play like Kellen in a movie, but
so cool.
Where did the names come from? Like, I didn't
have involvement with Kellen's name or with the witches' names. There were a couple characters throughout that I did name. I don't always get to pick the names, and sometimes when stuff is in the process of revisions, it ends up being changed for this or that reason. Something that the story team is very conscious of is trying to avoid names that sound too similar, as well as names that have negative connotations both in English and in other languages. So sometimes things get switched around.
What's a name that could be like, I wonder if there's an example, not maybe necessarily for Magic, but like maybe a name that
the whole Star Wars thing in Portuguese.
Yeah, Count Dooku. Yeah, Count Dooku is Count Shit.
Count Shit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh.
And there's also the Ghibli movie Laputa, The Castle in the Sky, is the whore in Spanish.
Yep.
So stuff like it does come up.
Wait, what? Did it translate to the Castle in the Sky? Translate to the whore in Spanish?
La puta is the whore. Yes.
But that's okay.
A feminine word, as you'll note.
Obviously.
Thing that they decided that one's going to be feminine because I can tell you right now, I know a lot of fays and like we're way bigger whores than.
Yeah. I might have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
How much of the whole cards mechanics and how much of the you guys already had known about the characters' personalities, how much of the let's say the flavor you guys wanted to enforce was already set up? Because the more I look at it, the more I just like look at the cards and look at the story and look at the set and just like it really fits well together, like in a really, really well done spot. Like how much of that was reinforced or how much of that you guys got to contribute?
So that's a really good question. The answer to that is that sometimes I get to know a little bit about it, but that's not something that really touches the mechanics themselves. That is to say, aren't really something that touches my desk all that much. The story team above me does have more involvement in that, and will sometimes try to weave things in there to make sure that there's synergy between the two. But that's not something that I necessarily deal with. Sometimes I do get color identities for characters. Like for Adeline, when we were writing her, that's a character I got to name incidentally. But when we were writing Adeline, we were like, she's a mono white Cathar, and we want her to embody the like knightly energy. And so I'm like, okay, I can work with that. For Imidane, for instance, we didn't have anything set up there. So I didn't even know that she was going to be mono red until I saw the card. There's, because of that, a lot of fun situations where when spoiler season starts, I'm just like, I wonder what their card does.
Makes it interesting for you as well, right?
Yes, it does. It's a very
Nice.
interesting season for me.
Have you gotten any cards? Were there cards that came out that you were like, oh God, this card's good?
Dude, Rowan is cracked.
Yeah, it broke my heart to see. I mean, I know that's like she has to be Rakdos, and like, but it's so sad because it's like, I mean, I really did have.
I like it.
It was tough. It's great. I get it, but it's so hard for me because I'm just like, poor. She's just going through it. I mean, and she's.
It's not. It's just a phase, right? It's in the golf phase.
God, I hope so.
Yeah.
Oh Christ! But I got the realization. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm just saying she's been on the path. I apologize.
The realization while I was reading it, I was like, yeah, they have this play going on, and it's sort of fayish.
Mhm.
And then you look at the twins cards, and they go, hold on, we have white and blue. Okay, that makes sense. It's law and order. Okay. Oh, that's a reference. Never mind. And then we have Rakdos. I was like, oh, that's cool. Hey, the original Eldraine, there was green associated with the fairies. Where is the green? Is that because the king? Oh my God! And like Cambridge is 5 colors. That's why he is united and everything. I was like, oh God, it fits together so well.
Kenny united everybody, and the twins have now split apart, and they're not just splitting in. They're enemy color pairs now. They're almost as far as you can get in the color wheel without, exiting it or introducing fucking Eldrazi shit. So, I mean, God forbid.
No, please don't.
Eldraine's been through a lot.
Yeah, all right.
Eldrazi. That's okay. Yeah, that would be that. What do they call it? Eldrazi Winter was what?
Yeah. That's.
Eldrazi Winter.
I mean, let's be honest, right? Let's leave the horse to Innistrad, right? Eldraine has been through enough. That's the most that you can say. I kind of found it funny that in Innistrad, right, you would have the whole holy books in the Bible, quote unquote, just to like, okay, you need that to survive in this world. And the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, it's the equivalent in Eldraine, right? We see that pairing of like, everybody knows the tales because that's how they taught things, not to fuck up with fairies because,
Yeah, and you see a bit of that with Ruby too, because Ruby is somebody who understands the story that she's in to some extent. And that's how she's most able to help Kellen, is realizing there are all these stories around. You don't know what you're doing. Let me guide you through this. And so the moment where she sees herself in a story and has transcended and become part of it is so integral to her.
That's an interesting point. And like, she really is the reader, the stand-in for the reader, because she's human and she's got all this knowledge see, Alison, I love it when people are smarter than me, because this kind of stuff, I was like, literally, I was like talking about you to Alison. I'm like, she's so much smarter than me. It's just fantastic. Like I can ask questions and I get to
5 minutes before we were recording, we're just like, we're gonna have her on the podcast. Like, that's great. We're just looking at each other like, she's so fucking cool.
Smarter than me, but you know what? I'm cool with that because I can ask questions and I don't have to worry about feeling dumb because I am dumber, and that makes all the difference. But
it's just a question in comparison to not a fact.
I know writers, like writers, like I've met, like I know a writer when I see a writer, and you are a writer. Like you guys you have all the tells. Like you're always smarter, and that's a dead giveaway. But the usage of the words, that's fascinating. Now, was that something that you decided? Was that a technique you brought in, or was that
with the prose?
Yeah,
that was something I just did. So I
or that or anything, or do they just probably let you just like that? That's something that they probably are not going to have any issues with because they hire you for your style.
Yeah. So, well, they hire you for your style, but also for your ability to match the style of the story that needs to be told, and that's. When you write for IP, that's something that you have to be very nimble about. You can have your own house style, so to speak, but it's also very important to be able to take different tools out of the box and apply them to the story as needs to be told. Like with March of the Machine, a lot of it usually was done to be very invisible prose that can get you going, get you to the plot, make images appear in your head as easily as possible, because we didn't have that much time to really dwell on some of these things. Now, there are some exceptions to that. The Tyvar section in the sort of montage chapter is written kind of in a similar way to the Eldraine stories, although that one is written to evoke Beowulf in particular. So you get a lot of the alliterative stuff there to evoke that feeling. And if I was to write Theros, then I would take my almost finished degree in classics and draw on that. So knowing how to apply different things is very important. And for Eldraine, I actually did take several courses on medieval literature. Ooh. So that's part of what I drew from here. Yeah, it was part of my creative writing degree that I never finished, but
okay, anyway, it was
kind of like a degree. So
it took me a second to understand what patina of ill use meant, but that was really good. That was one of those views, yeah.
Yeah, well, if you have to Google a few things if you're reading somebody, smarter, because that's so fantastic. I really do admire you for that kind of like trickery. I mean, it's a thing that people are not aware of that writers can do. Like you get to see people's magic tricks when they're actors, or if they're special effects, they're directors. Like it's all put in the forefront, but people don't get a chance to know about the nuances that go into being a writer.
It's very tricky. I think that artists in some senses have it easier because when they produce a finished work, it's easy to be consumed visually very quickly, right? And you can see with your eyes all the things that they might have done. Now, you might not get some of the intricate things like the use of negative space or the composition or color theory stuff might not occur to you naturally if you're not trained to do it, but you can still appreciate it on a surface level almost instantly.
Yeah.
Writing, you just need to invest so much more time in it. And you can't take that time for granted either. So when you're writing a story, you have to both keep in mind how to serve the plot and encapsulate the feelings that you wanted to encapsulate, but also how to draw the reader in and keep their intention and not take that for granted. And you do have to play a whole lot of tricks to get there, but it's something that is very rewarding when it goes off properly.
I see sometimes that maybe, as you said, like prose and choice of words and advancing the plot, it's just like color composition and all that thing, but we are not evolutionally trained to we're more visual humans, so it's complicated, right?
Because it's like it's active versus passive. Like if you're listening to music or if you're looking at a painting or watching TV, you don't have to be as present as you need to be when you're reading.
It's something that is great you might not notice, but if something is off, you would totally notice, and sometimes, and in just your case it works. Plus it's a great thing, but it's a great thing both for maybe accessibility or just like the fact that they're announcing it, the fact that it's actually someone read them, right? And it on the YouTube channel, and that was, I think that's a step in the right direction, right?
Yeah, I think that's huge.
What are your thoughts on that? Like your stuff being read out loud. Like, that was the first time, at least with Magic, right? Like that.
Yeah. The first official one is what I would say. They read parts of March of the Machine, but it was only like one or two chapters. I think it was only like half the chapter usually. I've met Harless before, who narrated the stories. She's great. There's the official Magic Story podcast that she runs, I think, with... Oh, God, I'm forgetting her name. Emily? I'm so sorry.
We'll figure it out later. I'll figure. Alison, look up now. Could you?
Sorry. Yeah, they're both great.
I already forgot her name. Sorry.
But they're great people. So I was happy to see Harless taking care of that, and I do think it's a huge step in the right direction. So many people, when they're consuming story content, they very rarely have the time to sit down and scroll through a whole story. But if you can convince somebody to play a YouTube video while they're driving to work or taking the train or whatever the case may be, it becomes a whole lot more approachable, especially because you can also set it to higher time settings if you prefer to. So absolutely, it's always a pleasure when my work is read out loud. It doesn't always happen, but every time it does, it always makes me happy, and I like listening to it just because you can hear some of the harmonies and the rhythm so much better that way.
Yeah, you get to have, have you, it's because as a writer, you don't really get, I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe some writers do this, but like having somebody else read your work to you.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's so tricky because like when you're writing a novel, especially, and you're in revisions, you're by the second or third revision, you're usually advised to start reading things out loud because that's the only way that you're going to catch mistakes because your brain at this point is just scanning over a lot of the words as much as you think you're actually reading them. But that's usually you reading to yourself or like, God help you, putting text to speech on and letting that read to you and suffering for several hours. But yeah, it's having somebody else read the story to you. It, for me, also divorces me from the story enough that I'm able to enjoy it as a listener, which is, you know, sometimes when you're reading your prose, you're a little too close to it and you're like,
yeah,
I should have done this, I should have done this. But when you're hearing it, it's easier to be like, oh no, this is somebody else did that and it's pretty good. I think that I've heard a lot of people at this point read out the first paragraph or so of the Wilds of Eldraine story, and it's so satisfying that everybody has hit on the exact rhythm I wanted for it.
I was going to ask that. I was going to ask if they managed. That's great.
That means that you did the job that you set out to do. Like it's not, you cannot argue it. And that's where I think writers don't get the kind of like glory that say like a musician or an artist does, in a sense that kind of magic is, and no pun intended, is really hard to pull off. Getting people to read out loud your own private metronome that you had going with the writing that's so cool. I mean, this story is really, I'm excited about this arc that's coming up because this is such a great kickstart and there's so much that you can tell is going to happen. And what I think also is nice is that I don't think Magic before has ever announced that this is the beginning of a series of stories. Like, I think it was never like, I don't think it was explicitly said like, this is going to be the beginning of the Eldrazi set or the Eldrazi story arc. Like, am I wrong in that, Alison? Or do you remember that?
No, I do not recall like that.
I don't think
especially with the Gatewatch, right? They were just like, we had Magic Origins and all that, and kind of halfway through it, I don't know if like that was the name or they throw it up or something, but it feels more structured in a way, right? It feels more they are announcing it, and it's great actually because again, March of the Machines, all that stuff, like more complicated. We got all the lore. It's just like watching the final Avengers movie without like watching anything before, right? This now, however, we had a couple of people who maybe got their trust in the Magic story broken, quote unquote, especially because, you know, so some other stuff we already mentioned that. But maybe, corporate, but no, not creative at all. No, no, like corporate. But maybe, especially now with announcing and how good this is, we can. You have no clue. I just want to find out. We can maybe just start reaching those people again. Just be like, hey, let's pick. You know, like let bygones be bygones. Let's start picking back up because this is some good stuff. Let's kickstart the engine again.
There needs to be more Vorthos people. I mean, like if you're not Vorthos, then I mean, you know, what's up? What happened to you?
It's a completely different way to enjoy the game, and I have some friends who are very much only here for mechanics and maybe art, and I love them dearly, but that's just not the way my brain works. What got me into Magic was Innistrad and Avacyn, and that story pulled me in. So there were a few people who mentioned me on Twitter who were like, this is the first Magic story I've ever read, and I want to read all of them now. And that just meant so much to me because story was what got me into Magic.
That is phenomenal. Okay.
Someone on Twitter, they were like basically announced like, hey, everybody, from this set forward, or was it I don't recall now. I don't think I can quote it correctly, but like, hey, you guys were complaining about Magic story and it was not announced enough. Let's read it actually. Like from this one forward or something. I don't know who it was, but it's
well, and I think the other thing too, now I'm kind of curious, I don't know if you know anything about this, but I do know that the Planeswalker, the Notorious issue #1 came out, and Oko is a character that is prominently featured in one of the stories in there. Now, I know that they're completely different. Like they're supposedly, they're very different. One's canon and one's like the alternate universe. But I'm curious, is there any cross-pollination whatsoever? Do the story teams interact with each other on those? Because I know that Shannon wrote a couple of the comics and then also worked on the stories as well. I mean, is that something that is ever acknowledged? Is that something you're allowed to talk about? Is that, what's there? 'Cause I feel like Oko being there was purposeful, but not entirely like maybe necessarily meant to be a direct pointer. But at the same time, I have to ask.
Yeah, no, I think that's very fair. It's not something that I can necessarily speak to directly because I haven't worked on any of the comics. I believe that it's a different story.
It is a different. It's a different universe. Like it's not. It's
it's a different universe, but I think the story team doesn't go into that as much. I could be wrong about that. This is just my assumption. But what I will say is that Shannon's idea of who Nahiri is, for instance, is usually consistent throughout. So when you have somebody like Shannon who's worked on both of them, the way that she will write Nahiri will always be the way that she will write Nahiri. In the same way, if I was to go ahead and write a comic, then I think the biggest point of consistency there would be that the way I write Liliana is always the way I write Liliana. All of that.
I have to ask, because you said if you were to write Theros, I'm wondering, I'm like, does that mean that there's some sort of like possible like Theros like unaired Arsenault Rivera story? Is there a Theros story like in hiding that was written in for funsies? Is there any? Are there things like that? And like, how much money would they?
I have not written any fan fiction.
No fan fiction
for Magic the Gathering. I've not written any Magic the Gathering fan fiction.
Your fan fiction, what it would be? I mean, it would be exactly what it is. It would just seem like an actual story because you're an actual story writer. But I would just try to kickstart that. Like the Theros Beyond Death by Arsenault Rivera, that would fucking rock. I mean,
dude, I love Elspeth so much. I would have been very happy to write something like that. It was funny when they were initially contacting me to write Magic. I was like, oh man, if it's Innistrad or if it's Theros, I'm gonna be so happy. And I got to write Innistrad, and it was incredible. And now I got to write Eldraine, which I also really liked, and it was incredible. And then I got to write Elspeth's Big Moment, and it was incredible. Right. So
right, she just takes Elish Norn out, just like she's like,
it was so cool.
She and Elish Norn, like, man, she just had it coming. I mean, she is just a mean, cantankerous little. Well, she's tall, I guess. Tall.
Cantankerous is.
She deserved anything. Yeah, she deserved anything that Ashiok threw at her. So, just saying.
But I always called her Cornish hen because when I first saw the card, I could not keep it in, so I'm just like Cornish hen. Because I don't know, Elish Norn, Cornish hen, like they could be.
It kind of works. Yeah,
it's like I don't know, not onomatopoeia-ish esque.
There's assonance there.
Assonance. Thank you. I needed the word. See, smarter. There you go. Boom.
I mean, you knew what you were talking about. You just needed the word for it.
Do you have the reaction to the story? How's it been? Like, have you?
Honestly, delightful. People have been so kind about this one, and people have really connected with Kellen and with Ruby. And I was a little worried about how people would receive Rowan's arc, but it seems like everybody understands that she's going through it.
It's really
a phase.
Okay. If it's a phase, though, I'm just saying, like, she's gonna this phase is gonna leave a scar because it's but you know what, Ashiok, man, he's the next. I mean, they are the next like Elish Norn-esque thing because I can't wait till the just desserts are served because Elish. Okay, so when Ashiok played the trick on Cornish hen and got her to have her Elspeth Nightmare on Elm Street moment. I was curious. I'm thinking maybe Ashiok is morally like, maybe there is moral ambiguity. Maybe they're not all bad. Maybe there's some good there. But now I think it's established. Like, no, I think that Ashiok might just be.
Ashiok is Ashiok.
It's a force of nature.
Yeah, Ashiok, they're a force, is what I would say. Is that force often used for evil? Yes, but I don't know if Ashiok would describe themselves as evil. I think that they would just describe themselves as hungry and interested in dreams. And I think that that's part of what makes them a really compelling villain too, is that you're never quite sure what they're up to or what their motivations are. They're kind of unknowable in that way. Sometimes when we give villains very down-to-earth motivations, it makes them very relatable, but it also makes them a bit less dreadful.
It does.
And Ashiok, when you see Ashiok, you're like, something's about to go down.
You can't bargain, right? It can't be reasoned with. You just like it's gonna go after your dreams
and
or nightmares.
Well, and then that's the thing too, is that Ashiok, you have to also, the fact that they're still a planeswalker is really terrifying, because of all the people that it got desparked, like that one's that's troublesome, because that's
the only thing holding the Phyrexians back was the trans planeswalking, right? And Ashiok's still there, looking at that.
Yeah, I mean the Omen Path is good and all, but like, oof, there's gonna be there's trouble afoot.
Yep,
there's trouble afoot. But
there's definitely trouble afoot. And when it comes to sparks, I think it's very interesting. When it comes to a situation like this, ideally you would want all of your favorites and all of the good people to retain their sparks so they can go around helping everybody. But that's not the way that these things work. They're random. So I don't think anybody would have picked Ashiok on a bingo card to have retained their spark. And I think nobody would have wanted them to, because it's just like, oh god, oh man.
It's like
even Oko is better, right? Just like go have mischief, but don't screw up with someone's head.
That's saying a lot, because Oko is a dicks. Like it's like dick. Like he was a dick. I mean,
he's gonna have a cool like college prank at someone, but he's not gonna like physically scar someone for like. I mean, actually,
not on purpose, maybe.
No, he did that to.
He'll scar, but like he's not. He's. I think really Oko's a dick. I mean, and I don't think that's like a bad thing to say. It's like just Oko is sort of just the trickster. He's, but
that's the archetype he falls into.
Yeah.
Ashiok retaining their spark, though, is really a signal to us that, like, we really don't know who's gotten to keep theirs, and there's no way we can really predict who's allowed to keep theirs.
Right.
And, there's that moment where Rowan wants more than anything to leave, to go somewhere else, to find some solution to this problem. And these kids who had nothing to do with the invasion, didn't know what was going on, they just lost their parents. And on top of losing their parents, their entire plane has been razed, essentially.
Yeah.
They don't get to keep their sparks, but Ashiok does. And I think that inherent unfair feeling is something that transfers onto Rowan very easily.
Yes.
Something that the reader feels and that Rowan feels.
Absolutely.
This is just my interpretation, actually. And
sorry, my Apple phone just
technology, it happens. I do believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong by this, we see the story kind of that we were rolling all throughout Rowan's point of view, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's not really insight on what's going on Will's head.
Right.
And I, at least, it came to my understanding, I don't know if that's something that I missed, like the fact that their sparks was not working, it wasn't exactly because they didn't have one, but just because they were like in disagreement with each other, and that kind of like pulled apart or something? Or am I just understanding that wrongfully?
Well, I mean,
because it for me kind of felt like that. And on the other hand, it's like it focused on Rowan, so like everything that Will did was like cold and Darren on the side.
Yeah, the focus is definitely on Rowan. I'm not sure if I can answer that question.
Yeah.
I was just looking at it as like,
I mean, that was very astutely observed of you, but I don't know if I can answer the question.
No problem.
On to the next subject. On to the next subject then.
Plus, like, Rowan's definitely like overworking to try to compensate everything, right? Just like, it's probably
so
like it's a Christ, it's gonna be
she's hurting. It was painful for me to read her, because she really is hurting, and
Will's overworking, so like it could have been as interesting to see from his point of view. Maybe not as adventurous.
They're both hurting, but I mean, I don't think I really connected with Rowan, I think, until this story, because she's like, you can understand why she makes the choices that she makes. you can understand why she is led down a certain path, because there are still people behind the scenes, you know, using her. She doesn't know. Congratulations on, like, it really was such a painful thing to read, which is so good because she's not supposed to be feeling good. Ugh.
She's not. And I think with the point about Will, that was, I mean, obviously, if we had had more time, I would have loved to get a Will chapter in there or something like that. But with the limited space that we had, we really had to focus on the resonance in order to make the most of the stories. And Will kind of stays in one place for the majority of it, whereas Rowan has a journey that parallels with Kellen's. So that was kind of the intent of focusing there, as well as Kellen walking toward unity and Rowan walking away from it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think Will is also for sure in a terrible place where he has to try and hold this entire realm together with Twine and Hope. And he's trying to make things work. He really is. But he wasn't ready to step into this role entirely. His sister's having a breakdown. He doesn't know how to help her. He's a little afraid of her, to be honest, and has been since Strixhaven.
Yeah, she's stronger. She's always been, like you wrote, like she's always been physically stronger. Like she's the tougher of the two.
Mm-hmm. And growing up and knowing that, well, Rowan's always been stronger. Rowan's always going to try and do something actively. And I mean, Will's already lost his leg too. He has a prosthetic leg. So physicality is something that there's always going to be a literal handicap in this case for him there. And he just wants to prove that he can do it. And he wants to get to a point where they can finally relax and he can show Rowan that it's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And Rowan, for her part, because she's so focused on getting something done right now, making some kind of progress right now, isn't in a place where she can slow down enough for that. Because if she slows down, all of the thoughts are going to overwhelm her even more than they already are.
It's such a fascinating build up to who they were in Strixhaven, because when watching their evolution, it's really, I think a lot of times people don't realize, but like the Magic story sometimes doesn't make sense until you get further down. Like for instance, like the emotional devastation of what happened on Eldraine, which, I mean, you'd think that if you were to ask me like, oh, well, which plane would you like to know about the emotional devastation of what happens from March of the Machines? I would be like, okay, I'm curious about what happens with Ravnica, right? Or Innistrad, like the popular ones. But for Eldraine to have been like, at first I thought, oh, that's going to be an interesting choice to see what happens, but it worked. And I think now reading it only adds to the March of the Machines storyline. People who were complaining that it was too short or that it was, whatever, this emotional devastation lends weight to it now. It gives it like the hindsight aspect of it is really great, because I think we needed that. I think we needed to see that pain that we needed to see, that we didn't have any story for the aftermath. And so we needed that. It was the kind of like finality of it that I think works so well. Yeah, and you must have known that before. I mean, I've
known it for quite some time.
That's got to be tough, right? To know.
Oh, it's so tough because it's like Eldraine got so fucked up, dude. And the thing about Eldraine too is that it's a fairy tale plane, so it's inherently got the sense of childlike whimsy to it. Things on Eldraine are kind of the way that you would dream them to be if you were a kid. And that's one of the main things that separates it from a plane like Lorwyn, where there's also a lot of fairy tale influence, but it's all twisted. And it's very dark. But on Eldraine, you've got like animated gingerbread people, and that's the place that had, almost all of its knights get murdered.
I know, right? And the cupcakes are all fucked up now. They're all
you can't eat bananas now. It's gonna bite your back.
Exactly. It's like they don't understand why this happened to them. They don't know what's going on. They're left to try and pick up these pieces, and we're going to see more of that, I'm sure, going forward as we visit new planes and also old planes, just seeing these things get torn apart and broken, and these people trying to cope with what happened to them, that in most cases they don't have an explanation for it. I mean, do you think that like random Ravnican number 5 understands why the Senate got blown up? No.
No, I don't think so. But that's so it's the truth. I mean, and I think that's the I think for me the nearsightedness of my own expectations from when I think from stories. Like I think that there is I just have so much good faith in now where the story is in the hands of the creative teams. Like for you, I mean, it's for a Vorthos person, this is such a huge relief because. Mm-hmm. There was a while where I sort of thought, okay, maybe the storyline's just gonna be gone for good. There wasn't, because when Theros happened, it was like, oh no, what's going on?
There was a lot of pauses there. There was a lot of like, what's going on with the story? Are you guys doing the story?
All of a sudden, Elspeth was alive, and
somehow Elspeth has returned.
So.
It was such an excellent, like the synopsis. I remember reading it. I remember being like, okay, all right, this is going to be a good story.
It sounds cool. And then it's like, but where is it? Where'd it go?
You kind of could be like, oh, the planeswalker in the set has escaped. Okay, so it escaped, but like, what does it mean, really?
I mean,
right?
Okay, yeah.
There was a key piece of flavor versus function right there working.
Like. Maybe we do have to kick. I'd be like, can we have raise money for a fan fiction for Arsenault Rivera? Just write that, because I mean, you tell us what happens, Dad, because I want to know what
in between. Just in between, yeah.
Come on, Heliod.
We need to see that done, yeah. I mean, if you're thinking Eldraine is a bad influence, yeah. Talking about him,
yeah, Heliod's like he's an epic dick. Like
R.I.P. Heliod.
Rest in turmoil is more like it, because what he did to Elspeth is dirty.
It's so dirty, and it's such a good example of white is not good. And I think that he and Elish Norn sharing that space is just such a chef's kiss narrative twist in Elspeth's storyline. Is that they're both like that. And so, of course, Elspeth was the one who takes Norn down because, firstly, she's mono white herself, but also she's done this before.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Like she's like, I'm done with she's like, that would be tough, right? You'd be like, you're a mono white faction, and you're like, man, this is just, I don't like. It's sort of like when you like.
They don't speak for that. He does not speak for the mono white community.
Somebody poorly that's made like for, Jewish or gay. I'm like, I know it doesn't speak for the rest of us. Let's
not. You can see he got a little bit of blue in that last card. Therefore, he's not a full member. Be gone or something.
Yeah, Jewish people, when we hear Harvey Weinstein, we're like, oh, that's not good. Not good. We don't want that. Don't want that. Not one of us. Officially revoke all of that.
Revoke the.
I revoke your. Yes, I think. Yeah.
Oh man. One thing now that I really miss, not gonna say miss, but it was a good part of stories like the new Capenna one and Neon Dynasty. They both came with song tracks.
Oh,
especially they had a whole song about Elspeth, like Train Back Home is great. And I was like, I'm not saying that they should do it for everyone, but just like the story, like when they did it for those two sets, it was like,
yeah, sometimes a set's narrative identity lends itself really well to that. I think that we could have had a really cool folk rock Eldraine album, but
maybe music would not be the focus. It's still this adventurous idea of like the bard playing the whatever song.
If we could do like a little bit of fantasy, like if you had an unlimited budget, okay, who would you pick? Like who would be some artists that you would pick, say for March of the Machines and for Eldraine, and let's say Crimson Vow, why not? We'll go for broke. Do you have any I'm sure you must have been listening to people.
All right. So Eldraine, I'm going to cheat here because I am just going to give Shannon whatever money she wants because
because she does
Shannon knows a whole bunch of folk people, and I think that and also does a bunch of folk music herself. So I think that letting her go to town on that, slam dunk, very easy. Just let Shannon do it.
Okay.
But in terms of March of the Machine, man, I would want something like arena-y sounding for that. Something that, gets across, like you could do the big, high, power rock songs, but you can also get some of the slow ones. So I'm thinking of like power metal bands, like fucking Sonata Arctica would be really cool for that sort of thing. Nightwish, I think, could also probably turn out a pretty good March of the Machines song. Also, they are used to writing 20-minute long songs. So,
Trent Reznor could do some March of the Machine stuff. Just only
Trent Reznor would do sick stuff for March of the Machine.
Yeah, Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor, they've been pairing together. They've been doing the scores for the recent soundtracks. I don't know if you've ever heard their version of the Halloween theme, John Carpenter's Halloween.
I haven't. No,
you gotta hear that. Oh,
yeah, I'll go check it out. Because I'm a big fan of Trent Reznor.
I feel like he could have done some cool stuff, and also because like Pretty Hate Machine, it just sort of pops right into your head. I'm like March Machine, Pretty Hate Machine. I mean, the Duster.
Yeah, I think I would have gone with Trent for All Will Be One instead of March of the Machine.
Oh yeah, that is a good idea
because there's more like body horror in All Will Be One, and I think that sort of vibe of. I mean, it's downward spiral where things are starting out okay. They're very rapidly becoming not okay. And I think I would have gone with him for that.
That's valid. Yeah.
Crimson Vow. Man, if I could go back in time and have whoever the fuck I wanted, I would want a typo negative song.
Well, that's just banger. Did you see that they did Nosferatu with typo negative? Where they put the music from Typo Negative to the Nosferatu film?
I did not. That sounds incredible.
Oh yeah, no, it's replaces you should see that big time.
No, that sounds amazing.
Right up your alley, like literally.
Yeah. I'm so into Typo Negative. They're one of my favorite bands, so I would definitely Typo Negative would be a big one there. I think that you can get God, what the fuck is this band's name? Ooh. Illuvite. There we go. Illuvite, I think, could also do a really good Midnight Hunt sort of vow, I think.
And it's I guess for songs that are already written, but that would fit in really well, I think Blood Roses by Tori Amos would be very...
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. That's a pretty good one.
Gotta have some Baroque in there. You gotta have, there's gotta be some harpsichord in Crimson Vow, right?
Yeah, 100%. That, Olivia's just making somebody play and has been for centuries.
That's also in her head. She is I think Blood Roses is what it sounds like to be in Olivia Volderen's head, just over and over again. She's so insane. She's insane.
There's Emily Autumn does a lot of she has an album of original violin work, and I think that some of the instrumental pieces from that would be very good for Olivia. Unlaced, I think, makes a lot of sense for her.
Oh, that would be good. Yeah, maybe we should, now it's just I wish I had just all the money in the world. I'd be it would be so awesome to have that funded, I really do want a Theros story from you. I'm going to find out a way to I don't know. I'm going to find out a way. There's got to be a way. I don't care if I have to turn tricks on the streets of Naples, which will not be that much money because, there's not really popular here for that kind of trade. But I will do it for a Theros, because it wouldn't be fan fiction. It would be I don't think there's a word for that, right?
It would feel official fiction.
It's if you wouldn't say Stephen King writes fan fiction. I mean, he could, but it's is he a fan or is he just Stephen King writing it? You know what I mean? I think
the Stephen King X-Files episode where it's not fanfic. It's Stephen King writing the X-Files.
I mean, I think that
maybe if you post it on Tumblr, maybe that would turn into fanfic.
And then it becomes a fanfic. Maybe I think you're onto something
the
there.
Medium. Maybe that's the medium.
The presentation matters a lot.
Yeah, I guess it would. Yeah, it would be if you just posted that randomly on Tumblr, I'd be why did you do that? You could.
We can always create a big account and not have accountability.
Could have made a promo video about that at least. That would be daffy. Well.
We're good places here.
I know, right? Well, I know, right? It's so wonderful. So we'll find out a way. I'm literally gonna ask it, how much does it cost to do that? Just
give me a price.
Just give me a number that would be, in the ballpark. But I won't keep you for much longer. But so before we go, did you have anything else that you wanted to plug or promote that's coming up? Any sort of stuff to get people to pay attention, or any closing thoughts on our discussion? And how much smarter you are than us as well.
I think you guys are plenty smart. I had a lot of fun
Alison,
discussion.
Alison is, but
I just code.
In terms of stuff to keep an eye on, definitely keep an eye on Magic's story, because clicks matter so much to us. And if you don't engage with Magic's story, you don't get more Magic story. So if you're at all interested in it, even if a particular set isn't to your liking, if you want to see more and give stories more space, then be sure you're engaging with it. Aside from that, me
And
personally.
engage with it though. Like spell it out for us. Like when you say like, you mean typing comments, liking, that kind of thing?
Accessing the website or something?
Yeah, accessing the website, or viewing Harless's videos on YouTube where she's reading them out loud, or in the set surveys that come out at the end of every set, mentioning story as a big point of importance for you is also, those are all very big things. Adding wizards and telling them politely that you like the story is also important. Using the hashtags, engage with the story as much as possible. Definitely do read them on the Magic site, mtgstory.com, as well as checking them out on the official YouTube channel. It's how we get more space to work with and hopefully more side stories in the future.
Okay. All right. Well, that's what we will do, because I'm telling you right now, like this is good. It's a good time for Vorthos. It really is. I think
so too.
I believe it is.
We're
think
entering some sort of renaissance, per se. It feels like it, at least. It feels like it.
I didn't want to say the word because that's, I mean, a lot of like.
I don't mind it. I don't mind it.
True. It's the word I thought of. I was like, this could be the beginning of the Renaissance. And it better be, because if it will be so sad.
I mean,
It'll
you are aware.
Personally.
You are aware that you just signed a contract, right? After every single thing you posted, you're gonna come here and you're gonna, we're gonna make everything exciting. We're gonna shout that to the 7 winds, right? It's not a choice.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% down. This has been a wonderful time. Yeah, the only other thing I have left to plug is, from a certain point of view, Return of the Jedi. When I'm not writing for Magic the Gathering, I write for a lot of other wonderful IPs. And I wrote a Star Wars story in From a Certain Point of View, Return of the Jedi, which is an anthology celebrating the 40th anniversary of the movie of the same name. So it's basically 40 stories from 40 authors. They're all very short, and they're centered on various characters that show up in the movie. Some people wrote like, there's a Mon Mothma story. There's a story about Anakin as a Force ghost. I decided to write about the guy that Luke force kicks. So he's my weird little guy, and I wrote all about him, and you can read my story. It's out now.
Yeah, I think when I talked to you, I think it was coming out the next day. I think when
yes, it was like coming out very shortly.
That's awesome. Now, you're officially like Star Wars canon, Magic the Gathering canon. You got your own.
And I also wrote for Batman once too. So
what?
I'm just all up in that. Yeah.
And you've got your own universe going on. I mean, do you feel like you've arrived? Because I think you have.
Thank you. Sometimes imposter syndrome is very tricky to deal with, but certainly for Magic, at least, I feel like I have arrived.
You have arrived.
Oh, Christ, you have. Oh, yeah.
You did. Yeah, I mean, she's in my local Barnes and Noble, and like that's a big deal, because like Naples is corporate. We don't have any independent bookstores here. It's a sad thing, but they had your sequel there, and I was like, no, yes, but I was really happy for you and then sad for me. So then I put it on order. But that's
also, that's another thing you can do that's very helpful for me is check out my original fiction too. The Tiger's Daughter, if you're into Tarkir at all, is a wonderful pick. It's about 2 princesses from fantasy Japan and fantasy Mongolia who hook up, fight a lot of duels, and beat up a bunch of demons together. Actually, Sean and McGuire blurbed it, which is how we first ever interacted. So Shannon and I go way back.
That's cool. Well, I'm going to get her on the line too, because there's eventually we'll try to have you on with both of you here, and it'll be like
you don't need to say anything. We'll just talk the whole time.
That's fine. I will listen. It's good stuff. Thank you so much for taking the time for this.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful.
And like Alison said, we'll do this again. If you want to come back, we will have you.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Please.
Thank you so much. Talk to you later.
Yeah, take care.
See ya.